we will get the cue from Miss Fu, right?
You can
I
start.
think she gave the cue on the chat. She
Yes.
said it was.
Just start, yeah.
Very good morning and welcome to the fourth Interfaith Dialogue organized by Kasih Hospice Foundation. Kasih Hospice Foundation is a community hospice which had been around in Malaysia for the last 25 years. We have been doing this interfaith dialogue because of the importance of understanding different spiritual belief in caring for the dead and dying. Today, we are very pleased to share with you that we are going to have this interfaith dialogue on the theme Spiritual Perspective of Advanced Care Planning. Advanced care planning is an ongoing communication of which we communicate our wish on how and what we want to care for in our physical, emotional, and spiritual needs at the time when we are too ill to express our needs. And this is very much important nowadays. As you know, we can get any sickness and we can suddenly become very ill, like what we have experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic, and certainly many other chronic sickness that any one of us may get. So as the decision for advanced care planning is very much depends on our spiritual belief and also the values we have that we think is important to us. So today, we are very fortunate to have 4 panelists from different spiritual organizations to talk about the spiritual perspective of advanced care planning. Let me introduce you one by one, and we then will start with a short presentation of advanced care planning by Kasih Hospice medical doctor, Dr. Munira Ibrahim. Our first panelist is Venerable Amy Miller, a Buddhist nun, who is also a touring teacher for the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition, founded by Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. She is based in US and she has written some books and the co-author of the book called Buddhism in a Nutshell. And Amy, not only a Buddhist nun, she is also provide emotional support to patients who have AIDS during the AIDS pandemic in San Francisco many years ago. And she offers courses and retreats on death and dying and on end-of-life care. Next, we have Reverend Father Dr. Clarence Devadas. Reverend is not stranger in Kasih Hospice Foundation Interfaith Dialogue, a priest and a director of the Catholic Research Center. He is also ESCO member of the Christian Federation of Malaysia and ESCO member of the Malaysian Consultative Council of Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Sikhism, and Taoism. He is also a visiting research associate at the University of Nottingham in Malaysia. Next, we have Madam Gauri Tanggaya. Gauri is a representation from the Malaysian Consultative Council of Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Sikhism, and Taoism. She's here to talk about a Hindu perspective because she's active in the Hindu Sangam in Malaysia. Besides, she has been involved in many of such forums in Malaysia, where we are very rich in the multicultural exchange of religion. Last but not least is Chaplain Sakina Abhabshi. Sakina also is no stranger to us because she has been very supportive of what Kasih Hospice Foundation is doing, and she has been with us in the past Interfaith Dialogue. Sakina is also the board member of Ziarah Spiritual Care. Being a Malaysian, she's now based in US, and she will provide us from the Muslim perspective of advanced care planning. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Siti Munira Ibrahim, Kasih Hospice Medical Officer, to present a short presentation on advanced care planning so that our audience who are new in ACP will have some foundational understanding of ACP. Munira, please.
Thank you, Dr. Go, for that kind introduction. It's an honor and pleasure to be here um, with everybody, with all the esteemed speakers from all around the world. I hope everybody can see my screen with the slides on. So I have 10 minutes to talk about ACP, which is not enough, but we'll try and do a short introduction for the purpose of this talk this morning. So when we talk about advanced care planning, I'd like to invite everybody to think about how we prepare for our life on this earth. We prepare in terms of many aspects: education, career, family, health, finances, property, and all sorts of ways that we prepare for this life, right? We also prepare for death. Most of us think about if something happens to us, do we have our will ready? For Muslims, wasiat or hiba or fara'id, we think about insurance or takaful. And obviously, we're thinking about what we leave behind for our loved ones. But the question is, do we actually prepare for dying itself? Yeah, the process before death occurs, when we may fall ill and we don't know how ill we will be before we actually reach the point of death. So have we ever thought about where we want to die, who we want to be there, how we want to die, and other questions that relate with that? So that's the question with regards to ACP. So what is ACP? Advanced Care Planning is basically about fulfilling our wishes, your wishes, everyone's wishes about care towards at the end of life or care while we are ill. So the question is also, are we allowed to choose these things? Yeah? Can I choose where I prefer to spend my last days? Who can make decisions for me if I can't make them myself? What treatments do I want to have? Do I not want to have? Can I have my special wishes fulfilled? Or if I have any unfinished business, can I attend to them during this time? And have we ever really thought of these questions seriously? Perhaps we do, or perhaps we've never thought of it. So ACP is a process between the individual, the most important person, and their family or loved ones, and also healthcare professionals. So it involves these three groups of people. And it's basically a voluntary discussion where the individual expresses their values, preferences, and beliefs regarding their future care, especially with their loved ones and also healthcare providers. And it's especially so if we are unable to make our own decisions. It may be that we fall ill and I can say, I want this and I don't want this. I can decide on this and that. But it may be also that we may lose capacity to make that decision, either due to a brain injury or being unconscious for whatever reason. And at that time, it's even more crucial to have an advanced care plan so that everybody around us knows what we want for ourselves. And this effectively reduces the burden for decision-making for family members, because family members will feel guilty. What does my loved one want? Am I doing the right thing for them? And as healthcare professionals, we are more likely to honor these preferences if we know about them in advance. And in fact, people say, oh, talking about death and dying will make people lose hope, but actually it's the opposite. It's actually expected when people fall ill to talk about these very serious matters, but sometimes it's very difficult to initiate the discussion. And people have misconceptions about ACP that it's only about death, when it's actually a process much before the point of death. Not only for the old or ill, anybody can fall ill at any age. That it's a legally binding document. It isn't. It's not legally bounded. Definitely not in Malaysia. It cannot be changed. It can anytime. And next month, next year, I want to change what's in my ACP. That's fine. It must be initiated by a professional. No, you can actually do it yourself. And we are doing courses in Kasih about how to fill in an ACP document, and that is expensive. Again, there's no lawyer needed for this. You can do it by yourself. That's we want to encourage everyone to have an ACP. I just want to share a few cases, a few patients. One of them is a patient that I treated myself. She was my patient, a 12-year-old girl from the United States, but she was living in Malaysia. She had brain cancer. Now, after so many treatments in hospital, by the time I saw her at home, she had made a firm decision. I want to stay at home. I never want to go back to hospital again. That's one decision she made. Number two was that she wanted to be independent for as long as possible. So even though she could no longer walk, she refused to have a wheelchair. She refused to have any aids because she wanted to stay independent. She refused medication called steroids, which could help with brain swelling, but she didn't like the side effects. So she said, I do not want any more steroids. She's still young, 12-year-old, but she knew what she wanted, and she made her own decisions, and her parents respected that. She didn't want any tube feeding because with brain cancer, you can have difficulty swallowing, which she did have. But she said, at any point in time, I do not ever want to have tube feeding. And so she was very firm in this. One last wish she wanted to donate her brain after her death to cancer research in the United States. And that was a very special, special wish. And why? Because she was angry and upset that nobody had found a cure for her disease. She wanted at least to leave something behind so that perhaps, a cure could be found for other children. Such a sweet thought. And we made this happen. Extremely difficult, never done in Malaysia before. And we got a team together and towards the end of her life, she fell unconscious suddenly for one whole week. And at that point, we had the discussions again with the parents. Do we start steroids? Do we put a tube in? But we all knew that's not what she wanted. So we knew that this is her wish, and we kept with her wish. She finally passed away peacefully at home, and we got the very complicated process of donating her brain and sending them to the United States. So this is where, as you can see, planning in advance, knowing the patient's wishes can help us to really carry out their final wishes. This is another patient. It's actually a theoretical patient, but so many patients that are like this. Mr. LK, who's 68, just found out he had lung cancer, very breathless, and knows he only has a few weeks to live. He lives with his wife and son. So scenario one is he goes home, suddenly becomes unconscious. Family panic. What do? We just call an ambulance, right? Patient is brought to hospital, given CPR, intubated, ventilated, put in a tube, admitted to the intensive care unit. In the end, family couldn't visit because due to COVID, and he passed away 2 days later. Now let's consider an alternative scenario. This patient, Mr. LK, was referred to hospice from hospital. And so when he was discharged, the hospice team met him at home. We discussed about ACP with him. What would you like, Mr. LK, if you suddenly fall even more ill? And he said, no, I want to stay at home. I've had enough of hospital. I do not want to go back to hospital. So when we knew about this, so when the moment he became unconscious, we immediately go to visit him. We prepare the medications to keep him comfortable. We teach the family how to support him at home. And he spends his last moments among his loved ones, and he passes away 2 days later. As you can see, the outcome is the same, but the quality of the last moments of life is completely different. And this is what ACP is all about. And other examples are, avoiding CPR, what we choose for our medications at end of life, whether we want a burial or cremation for those who have a choice, and wishes for organ donation, lots of things that we can actually plan in advance. So when we talk about quality of life, it's about living well and also dying well. And we talk about life-sustaining treatments like CPR, about going to ICU, and also having tube feeding, which are choices that we can actually think about right from the very beginning. Okay, so I just want to invite everybody to imagine a situation where we are given a terminal diagnosis and we have a prognosis, or a time span, expected time span of weeks to short months. We have a lot of pain and difficulty breathing and can no longer walk. So at this point, want to consider what activities or experiences are important at this point in time for me to have a good quality of life now, with this bearing in mind. What fears or worries do I have about my illness or medical care? And what helps me when I face these challenges, these kind of serious challenges in life? What are fears and suffering to me might be different to somebody else. Maybe I want to address those. And if I become more sick and physically dependent on others, where do I want to be? Who do I want to take care of me? Who would be my representative if I cannot make decisions for myself? Can I choose my mother, my sister, my daughter, my partner? Can they discuss what I want, not what they want, but what I want, my preferences, my values, my goals? Are they willing to follow my preferences? And can they make decisions under stressful situations? So who is this representative going to be? If I had a severe brain injury, I cannot make my own decisions anymore. Do I want life-sustaining treatment? Do I want to be kept in the ICU for weeks or months on end? Or do I say, no, just try for maybe maximum a week. If nothing happens, there's no chance of survival, then please stop. Or just send me home, and I want to be in comfort, in the comfort of my own home. Perhaps I have religious or cultural personal beliefs. Perhaps I want a religious person to come and have this discussion with me so that I know in terms of my religion, spirituality, this is the preference that I wish for. Do I want any other people to be involved in this particular discussion? And so this is the ACP we are talking about in terms of preparing this document, putting down on paper the preferences that we want for our care in case this happens. And like we said, this can happen anytime. Now, in Malaysia, there's still some taboo to this, or the trying to make this culture of ACP, because there's a lot of the time people leave the decision to the doctor or the family member. People don't know about advanced care planning, and at this point in time, it's still not yet a legally binding document, which is fine. It doesn't mean that we can't have it. In fact, it's probably a good thing as well. And it's a very sensitive subject when we're talking about the subject of death and dying, and so it must be very discussed properly, sensitively, and in the absolutely the right approach. And if somebody says, no, I do not wish to discuss this, that's also a decision as well. So this is just an example of the form that we have come up with in Kasih. Very simple. You can see it's just about wishes, what are the things you want, and you can extend on this, whatever you want to put in there, whatever you don't want to fill in, and it's just really our own document of our wishes. And if we want to choose our representative to represent us, if we are unable to make those decisions, then we can also put them down after we have discussed with them. So that's it from me. I hope that's a short introduction just to fill everybody in about what advanced care planning is about. And I look forward to the discussion that we will have with our esteemed panel of speakers. Thank you so much. Dr. Goh, you are mute.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Munira. Let's start our discussion on today's theme on spiritual perspective on advanced care planning with Chaplain Sakina on how your religion teach people to prepare for deliberating sickness and death. Sakina.
Okay. Good morning, everyone in Malaysia. It's evening time. You can see it's dark over here in the US. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My peace and blessings on all of you. Thank you for the invitation and the trust from Kasih Hospice. I'm just starting my timer because I want to make sure I keep time. And I just really appreciate the courage of Kasih to keep doing these interfaith dialogues and to bring up the difficult conversations that are really an important part of all of our lives. And so I want to begin. Thank you, Dr. Munira, for your detailed explanation, brief, concise, but pretty detailed explanation about different aspects of the ACP. I'm grateful that there's people like you who are advocating for this in different communities as well. So let me begin by rephrasing a little bit. I like to think of advanced care planning in reverse. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to plan for my care in advance. And in Islam, planning for every aspect in our life is something that is often brought up in our faith. We're not just meant to live life in an unintentional way. We're meant to live life with intention, and with intention comes planning, comes action. All of that is part of our worldview and our approach to life. It's falling down. Islam teaches us that our body is an amanah, so our body is a trust, and that we are responsible to care for it, but that ultimately our life is actually in our soul, not in our bodies. And our soul has been alive since God created it, long before we came into this planet, in the realm of the souls, alam al-arwah. And then our souls were blown into our bodies in our mother's wombs, and then we are now given the opportunity to live in this world, and as a test. And this is repeated in the Quran in different ways. Probably the most common is in Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter number 2, verse 155. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, and Allah continues that we will test you, and we will test you, we will test you. And Allah lists the different ways that we are tested in this dunya, in this world, through loss, and through loss of health, through loss of wealth, through pain and grief and different aspects. But our journey here, it's also an experience of the manifestation of God's divine qualities and attributes, we get to experience Allah's guidance. We get to experience provisions, risks, gifts, beauty in this world. We get to experience compassion. We get to experience love. And we wouldn't be able to being engaged in our life here. And yes, sometimes the test of life comes as an illness, and also the perspective that health is also a test. What are we doing with our good health? How are we putting our health to benefit others around us and to benefit other creations of God? So I kind of want to reframe the perspective also. It's not just that the illness is a test. Health is a test. Our whole life is a test. This is not something we run away from. This is part of our reality. The root word of death in Arabic, maut, mim wauta, maut, al-maut, comes up in the Quran in many different forms and conjugations. It's mentioned approximately 150 times, approximately, plus minus. I think that's a lot. I don't know if you think that's a lot. I think that's a lot. And it sounds like it's something that we might want to pay attention to. Not a taboo, not a secret topic to avoid or be hush-hush about. As soon as we are alive, we know that we're going to die. And in fact, one of the dua and prayers that Muslims are taught to recite every night before we sleep is Bismikallahumma namutu wa nahya. In Allah's name, in God's name, we die and we awake. We die and we live. So sleep itself is considered a minor death and one that we experience daily. So imagine the level of awareness that a Muslim is invited to embrace when it comes to preparation for death and just the awareness of death. And what does Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, say about death? There are many narrations from the Sunnah, from the tradition. And one of my favorites that I feel really fits into this discussion specifically about the advanced care planning is a narration from Ibn Majah. It was narrated that Ibn Umar, one of the companions of the Prophet, said that I was with the Messenger of God and a man from the Ansar came to greet him. And he greeted the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, with greetings of peace, of salam. He then said, O Messenger of God, which of the believers are the best? And the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, it is the one who has the best manners upon them, the one who has the best manners upon them. Then he asked again, the person asked again a different question. Which of them are the wisest? Which of them are the wisest? Akiyas, the word in Arabic, akiyas, like your mental sharpness, the wisest. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, responded that the one who remembers death the most and is the best at preparing for it, that is the wisest. The one who remembers death the most and is the best at preparing for it. In the tafsir, or in the explanation of the hadith, scholars discuss different aspects of preparing for this death. In general, our whole life is a preparation for death. As a Muslim, every deed, every breath, every move, everything that we do with intention is a good deed, is a preparation of an intentional life and death, preparation for death. And then there's also the tangible, practical preparations of death, like what we're discussing today. Are we talking about the will? Dr. Munira mentioned that it's often people think about this as like, okay, let me prepare my will, the financial stuff and all that. Yeah, that's important. And yes, that's also something that Islam teaches. There is a hadith, a narration from Prophet Muhammad that says we shouldn't live for 2 nights without having our will prepared and ready. So again, like that sense of urgency and awareness and closeness of that preparation for death. And the will is not about finances only. The will could include a love letter to our families. A will could include reminders and teachings that you want to share with your children, with your loved ones. The will could include an apology. The will could include instructions or preferences that you have for funeral preparations and your healthcare preferences. So just widening the understanding of what a will includes, in a way, is a perspective also at supporting these conversations around the advanced care planning. So the other aspect of it is how much Islam places an importance on documenting things, whether it is a debt, a marriage contract, or a business contract. Teachings of Islam often request or advise or recommend us to document these decisions or conversations or decisions. And in a similar approach, an advanced care plan is usually something that after the conversation is had, it is documented in a certain way, and there may be witnesses to the document as well. So it is very much aligned in the importance of documenting and witnessing important decisions in Islam. And I understand that sometimes we feel, oh, I don't need a document. Everybody knows what I want. My family knows, the doctors knows, I've talked about it. We've had conversations about it. Why do I have to write it down? That may be true. That may be true. Often documents come into play when there is conflict, when there is misunderstanding, when family members are sitting there arguing over the dying mother or dying father in bed because, oh, but Ibu told me she wanted this. Well, but Ibu told me she wanted something else. Well, do we have this on paper? No, we don't. And now the siblings are fighting. And this is like one of the most, I feel like, painful experience for a loved one to go through, well, when they're in the process of dying or just being seriously ill, that their death now becomes, and that's really, really sad. We'll talk, I think, a little bit about that later. Conversations around the documentation also often trigger deep reflection and self-exploration, which is another aspect of Islamic practice. Tadabbur, tafakkur. Are you really reflecting on what's important in your life, our values, our priorities? It's not a process, but I'm made easy with better understanding, communication, compassion, and it's definitely worthwhile. Before I end, I have a minute or so. I just briefly want to go through Rasulullah Muhammad's, peace be upon him, his own dying process and what we've learned from that briefly. You can check on YouTube. There's some presentations by Dr. Kamal and Dr. Rami Salah. I can send resources later which talk about it in a bit more detail. But Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he acknowledged an acknowledgement of his death. And he, with his family and publicly, it was revealed that his time was coming. He did not know exactly when, but there was an awareness of the nearness of death. And that's similar maybe to some of us and some of our loved ones. We never know exact time of death, but we may know somebody has a serious illness or they may have an accident that's terminal condition that's terminal. So we have some awareness of the nearness of death. And Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would he talked to one of his excursion and he talked with leaving Medina and heading to Yemen, and meet me again after this year. Perhaps when you return, you will see my masjid, my mosque, and my grave. Mu'adh then started to cry, and the other companions around the Prophet also cried. I share this to reflect on the importance of being open and transparent about impending death, and how that open communication can also encourage expressions of love, expressions of reconciliation, seeking forgiveness. Prophet Muhammad also, with that decision, peace be upon him, with that awareness, was able to plan teachings and legacies, practices, rituals and practices. He was able to lead the final Hajj, the final pilgrimage, speak the final sermon. He asked his wife to also give charity, whatever money was in the house. So these were some rituals that we are able to maybe reflect on what we want to do in preparation, knowing that our end of life is coming. What are some rituals and practices that are important to us? We want to share with others. Autonomy. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wanted to die in a certain place in his wife Aisha's house. He declined a certain bitter tasting medicine that he did not like. So there was autonomy in decision making. There was autonomy in declining certain levels of treatment. And that is part of the Islamic teaching as well. In the moment of death, around the time of death, he was seeking forgiveness from God, from others, surrounded by his loved ones. Hygiene was important, was the end of life. Our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, noticed a companion walk in with one of those sticks that they used to use to clean teeth, and he signaled that he wanted that. So on his dying, on his deathbed, that was given to him, and his wife cleaned his teeth. So oral hygiene, we talk about it in the ICU, in the hospital all the time, how important that is also. And then from his death, also we learned about postmortem care, peace be upon him, the bathing of the bodies, the shrouding, the prayer, and the burial process, and how what we can do to prepare for the dying process as well. The reality is, I'll end saying that alongside medical advancement, statistics show that more and more people are dying from prolonged chronic serious illness. They're going in and out of hospital multiple times, in and out of ICU multiple times. They are living longer years-wise, but in a state of illness. So these conversations around planning for our care in advance and ACP are really important to help navigate this phenomenon. And I think that this topic is very important. So thank you, and hand you back to
Thank you
Dr.
very much, Sakina. Thanks. So we would like to hear from Venerable Amy Miller from the Buddhist perspective on how to prepare for death and serious sickness.
Thank you so much. Please do let me know if I am breaking up during the presentation. I'd like to thank Dr. Go. I'd like to thank Kasih Hospice and all the presenters. And thank you so much. It's such an important topic to discuss. So I'd like to discuss right now from a Buddhist perspective. I'm trained predominantly in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And death and impermanence is one of our main teachings. It's something that is prevalent all the time. So in some ways, I'm just going to share an image that I use sometimes in the death and dying retreats and courses that I teach, because we also need amusement. We also need amusement in the end of life care. It is actually helpful to contain at appropriate times. And what happens is we're in a lot of denial. A lot of our cultures don't want to discuss death. I find it interesting in Malaysia where some of those documents are not yet legal documents. So there is this level where it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for us. So sometimes I just start students with this. So those of you that are on Zoom can see it. If you're in the Facebook live world, it is basically a US cinema marquee. So in the old days, we used to have these cinemas or movie theaters, and they would show you what's playing. And so I have this thing that says death coming soon to a body near you. This is what's happening. We need it promoted. We need it announced like that because we really don't want to discuss it. It's now being more and more discussed, especially in the United States, like that. So what I'm going to explain is the way we prepare in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is one of the fundamental things. We have different death meditations that we instruct our students. The easiest one is to wake up every morning, and I have a process of initial moments lying in bed to experience gratitude first. Gratitude. Some people wake up with a groan. Some people wake up not appreciating the fundamentals we have in life, like food, clothing, and shelter. So I have just a minute or two lying in bed, realizing my body seems to be functioning. My mind seems to be functioning. Fantastic. Fantastic. So the next moment is some recollection. This could be my last day. This is the easiest death meditation we teach, that I teach. And I actually live it where it's not that it could be my last day. This is my last day. 6 o'clock this evening, it's over. Okay. So it's not about being fearful. It's not that it's a morbid. It's simply, how do I want to make meaning today if I have one more day? Some people will say to me, you're going to be creating your death with that thought. You will create your death. I've been doing this for years and I haven't died yet. Okay. So it's just this awareness of it does happen to people. They wake up, they're not thinking about death, and it happens to be their last day. So when I wake up with this feeling, it's not about what I'm going to do that day necessarily. Because people say, if this is my last day, well, then I'm not going to work. Okay. No, so this is actually, how do I want to be on my last day? And for me, I would also like to make the most meaning of the day. In our tradition, fundamentally, it's about benefiting all living beings, benefiting all living beings. So could I devote the activities of my body, speech, and mind throughout today to get me on a path that will help me fully wake up, which is really what Buddha means, fully awakened being. But I want to reach that state. That's not the end of the path for us. It's a means to benefit all living beings, to serve all beings perfectly, to help others as much as we can, and also helping ourselves along the way as well. So then I get up with this motivation, okay? And then we move into a longer meditation for us when I'm leading longer death and dying retreats, is we may do a meditation on our own death. So it's a guided meditation. It can take 45 minutes to an hour. And I will actually lead people along as if they're finding, for instance, a lump on their neck, obsessing about it till they make the appointment with the doctor, till they go to the doctor's office. And we're moving along with each phase of what it is like now to wait in the doctor's office, and what happens when they need to do a biopsy, and what are you thinking about? What are you experiencing in those moments when the doctor calls you back in to their office to deliver news about cancer, or when they decide they have to do more surgery, and when they finally deliver the news, there's nothing they can do, and you have months left. Okay, so that's a longer meditation we do. The middle way that we teach people is through something called the 9-point death meditation. 9-point death meditation. This is a standard way we would instruct people to take each point and slowly over time reflect on each of the points. Basically, 9 points are categorized under 3 main headings that are called 3 roots. Under each root are 3 reasonings that will more deeply convince you of the root. Each of those 3 reasonings lead you to a resolution where you have a firm determination in your mind. This is how I need to practice. This is how I need to practice to wake myself up, to get the most meaning in life, to get the most meaning in life. Let me explain a few, go through this 9-point death meditation. So please let me know if there's anything you cannot see. The first thing we would do, which is most important in our tradition, is to set a good motivation again, to set a good motivation. I'm not just doing this out of the blue for nothing, is I'm doing this so that it's not just about having a good death, it's about having a good life that will lead me to a peaceful, good death. The reason I want to do it is to also help build my and develop my practice, to help me become a Buddha, okay, for the purpose of benefiting all living beings. So I would take a moment, maybe reciting some preliminary prayers that kind of get my mind in the mood, and then we're going to slowly contemplate. We would take the time to contemplate each point. Again, so root number 1, death is certain. We explain to people 3 reasonings under this. Everybody dies. There's no power in the universe that can stop death from coming to us. So we would slowly reflect, everybody dies. In 100 years, everyone here probably on this panel, in this conference, will be gone. You know, we cannot escape death. And so no matter how wealthy you are, no matter how strong, powerful, no matter how creative, nobody can escape. And so you're going to take each of those moments and really more deeply go in over and over and over. Reasoning number 2 is you cannot add any time to life. It's quickly passing away. And you want to slowly contemplate in this phase, I'm another moment closer to death. I am another Friday closer or Saturday closer to death. Okay. I'm another breath in closer to death. I'm another breath out closer to death. I'm another meal closer. I'm another sip of water closer. So each of these things slowly really melting your mind into that space with no distraction. That's reasoning 2. Reasoning 3, while we're alive, we're not practicing a spiritual path very much. There's very limited time. You'd slowly consider how much time you spend sleeping, how much time you spend eating, preparing food, buying things, getting educated, working, spending time with family and friends, and on and on. So again, reasoning 3, while we're still alive, you would reflect on how much formal time are you practicing. And they often say in a normal 75-year lifespan, we're spending maybe about 5 years of formal practice. And these are for people, more religious people, like that. So these 3 reasonings, under the root of death is certain, can help you come to a conclusion, a resolution, that knowing I'm definitely going to die, I must practice Dharma while I'm still alive. Dharma being the Buddhist philosophical treatises, meditations, teachings like that. So knowing that I will die, I must practice while I'm still alive. Root 2 we come to is the time of death is uncertain. The time of death is uncertain. This one is harder to realize because most of us, I think, intellectually know we're going to die. Through these meditations, we're moving the intellectual understanding from here to a heart level realization here, where you have an experiential realization. That's what changes your life and starts having you step up your spiritual practices so that you're making more meaning in life. Okay? Leading a good life, you tend to have a good death. Time of death is uncertain. We don't really get our minds around as much. We think we will die in our sleep peacefully when we're old, and that doesn't happen to a lot of people. So we have 3 reasonings under this. Reasoning 1, we live on a planet with an unfixed lifespan. As we know, people die at every age. And unfortunately, children sometimes die before parents. Health is no guarantee. Very healthy people pass away quickly. And just because you have future plans, it doesn't guarantee that you will be there. Reasoning 2, okay. Reasoning 2 is there's many more things that can kill you than keep you alive. So we have many, infections, natural disasters. We have pandemics, as we know, bacterias, viruses. Even food can be the cause. Even medicine can be the cause of your death. Reasoning 3 is the body is very fragile. So we know the material of the body is much more delicate than the materials made in a car, which is why people die in a car crash from high impact like that. These 3 reasonings can lead you to a resolving conclusion that knowing I can die at any moment, that I have no idea when I will die, I want to lessen the distractions of this life and practice Dharma now and get my spiritual practice going now. Root 3 is the easiest to generally realize that our spiritual practice is really the only thing that benefits us at the death time. Money and possessions are of no help. They may make your body a little bit more comfortable to have the nursing staff around you, to be able to die at home in the way you want. But I've known people that have died like this and their minds are not happy. So that doesn't guarantee that your mind will be peaceful. Reasoning 2, friends and family can support you, care for you, make you as comfortable as possible, but often they are fighting over your belongings. They're not getting along themselves. Okay? They may be crying over you, begging you not to die, feeling that they can't live without you, which does not make your mind peaceful. If they know your practices, they know what prayers you would like recited around you, can be very helpful. Okay? Reasoning 3 is the body is of no help generally at the death time. It's sometimes one of the reasons we are getting closer to death. So from these 3 reasonings, we can come to a resolution that knowing I'm definitely going to die, knowing it can come at any time, there's nothing that can truly help me. Okay? I have to devote myself to a robust Dharma or spiritual practice. And then what we would do is dedicate any merit or positive energy in the conclusion that we can have a rich, consistent practice that will lead us to not only have a peaceful death, but to reach a fully enlightened state as quickly as possible so we can benefit all living beings. And what you would do with these meditations is they are designed to be done again and again and again until, again, the intellectual understanding moves to a heartfelt spiritual resolution, spiritual experience that can really shift our lives, helping us to lead more meaningful lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable. Now let's listen to Father Clarence from the Christian perspective.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much, Dr. Go. Thank you very much to Kasih Hospice Foundation for inviting me yet again for a conversation on interfaith. And today we're talking about advanced care planning. Before we talk a little bit about the Christian or the Catholic perspective, let me just state that, you know, as much as we would like to talk about illnesses, dying and death, you know, it's something that perhaps when we meet with that reality is something very different. We can talk as much as we would like to, but when you have to deal with that reality, it's a whole different ball game, if I may use that expression, in that reality. I was just thinking to myself, this morning we have this forum online about dying and about death. Probably doesn't attract much attention, doesn't get much traction. If you had a talk about maybe how to live longer, probably you get a lot more people tuning in this morning to say how can I prolong life, how can I live longer. But death, dying, illness, these are realities that we cannot run away from. I often say that as much as possible, we want to prolong life. And the reality is that for all of us together, I mean, we who are speaking about it, our esteemed speakers, we also know from our own experience, every decade of our lives or every couple of years after a certain age, we are having 2 breakfasts in that sense. You know, you have one regular breakfast, probably a toast or something like that. And your second breakfast is a bowl full of pills, of supplements, to keep you going as long as possible. So I think there is this natural resistance towards illnesses, about dying, about death, and I'm sure many of you have read Kubler-Ross's On Death and Dying, and she speaks about the stages of dying, and the 5 stages of dying. And I think the first one is denial. And so we try to keep this as far away as possible. Coming from a Christian tradition, Christian perspective, I think, you know, when you talk to people in general, people who are not being confronted with these challenges of death and dying, if you ask people, how would you like to die? A lot of people would say, I would like to die in my sleep. You know, that would be a kind of a natural thing to say, because we don't want suffering. We don't want any to cause anybody any trouble, to cause any inconveniences to our loved ones, you know. And from my own Catholic tradition, there used to be a prayer, you know, long ago when people used to pray, say, Lord, deliver me from sudden death, in that sense. But things have changed. Things have changed in that sense. So as I said, there is this natural resistance, and we do not want to talk about dying, death, until we really have to confront with it. And I think one of the realities is that as much as we talk about advanced care planning for ourselves, it is a reality that sometimes we want to push as far as possible, having to talk about this. I also know people who do not want to prepare their wills until such time when it's really needed to prepare their wills, because of not wanting to. I think there's a kind of a taboo. There's a kind of a resistance. Maybe if I use the ordinary term, people think it's bad omen to talk about death, and it's something that you do not want to talk about. But I want to as opening remarks, I just want to maybe set some foundations about life, about death, that are important from a Christian perspective, because if I were to jump into what you can do and what you can't do, then perhaps it kind of does not give a clear understanding what a Christian perspective is all about. So allow me to just share some key points. I'm going to share some slides. Let me. Okay, so I hope you get to see this. Just some key points about life before in the second round of conversations we talk about in more detail about advanced care planning, or from the Catholic perspective, advanced medical directives, things like do not resuscitate. Let me just start off by saying that I'm coming from a Catholic perspective. Yes, Christian, but the applied ethical parts of this foundation may be different in some other Christian traditions. Let me just say that from the beginning itself. So I think I want to start by just stating this. For us Christians, life is something very sacred, in the sense that life begins with God. In the Bible, in the book of Genesis, the very first book where he talks about the creation of man and woman, is that God himself breathes life into the human person. And so the creator of life is God. And if God is the creator of life, then God is the one that sustains life also. And I think this is a very important principle to remember, that the origins of life doesn't really matter how life is conceived, but the origins of human life is in the context of God granting that great gift. So the starting position is life is a gift. It's a gift from God. It's not something that we have merited or I have merited because of my ancestors, but it's something that God's gratuitous gift to each one of us. And from that perspective, just to see that some three foundational principles when we want to talk about human life, and it's very much related to also illnesses, death, dying and death. Firstly, I think one has to remember that for Christians, life is sacred. Life is sacred. And the sanctity of human life is a gift bestowed by God. Okay. Very often today, in the world that we live in, and I've already heard this, we talk about quality of life. Yes, I'm not negating the aspects of the quality of human life, but in the same breath, from a religious perspective, I also talk about the sanctity of human life, how that life is sacred. And because it is sacred, it entails some things that we should keep in mind when having to talk about illnesses, dying, and death. The second point I've already mentioned, God is the source. So human life begins from the moment of conception and ends with death, returning back to God. And so, it's in this sense, we are transient. We are migrants in this world. Yesterday, I was listening to the radio, and the host was having this conversation and saying that there are about 6 million migrants in Malaysia. But in the context of today's, the whole world, the population of the world, we are all migrants. We are not permanent here. We are moving from God and being here on earth and returning back to God. And the third key principle is this, that life has intrinsic dignity, and that life has value in whatever form, in whatever state, whether in the beginning, whether in the middle, whether in the end, whether you are healthy, whether you are not healthy, whether you are dying, or, life has got an intrinsic dignity because it is a gift from God. So from that perspective, the dilemma is this, very often when we talk about this, that because the advancements in technology, there's always this thing about prolonging life, and we do not want, and I've already mentioned in the beginning, how we ourselves want to prolong life with medication, with supplements, etc. So in that sense, we are conflicted now more than before, in that sense, because we live longer and we have medical advancements that help us to live longer. So some key principles, just a few key principles to lay down the foundations in talking about death, dying. First thing I think is that, as I mentioned, everyone, whether you are ill or not ill, has got a certain value, a dignity. This is the Latin maxim, primum non nocere, first do no harm. That every life is sacred. Every life has to be respected. Every life has to be protected also. The second point is that when someone is ill, support structures is very important. And I think especially from an Asian context, family, extended family, these support structures are very important, especially when we talk about the spiritual aspects of preparing for death when someone is ill. And it's not something that just myself have to undergo, or what do I want for myself, but there's this kind of a network of relationships that affect people in different way. I may want something, but maybe my family wants something else for me. I may be ill. Am I in the right frame of mind to make those decisions very quickly? Intentional death, probably we talk a little bit about, from the Christian perspective, you cannot hasten death, because the very fact that life begins with God and God infuses the human soul, God has the ultimate authority to take that soul back, the separation of the body and soul, so that there can be no human intervention to expedite that process in that sense. Everyone who is ill in that state deserves basic care, basic human care, nutrition, hydration. I'm not going to go into the technicalities of it, but basic care, comfort, pain relief. These are things that people would require in that sense, and also palliative care. And this is something that we keep talking about. And so, in that sense, coming back to what we are talking about, I think what is important to remember from a Christian perspective is life is sacred at any form, in any time, and how do we preserve that sanctity? And I think this is where very often people are conflicted. People are conflicted in the sense that in a society where we, with the culture of death is so averse, we don't want to talk about death. Very often we want to hide people who are terminally ill. People who are terminally ill do not want to meet other people for various reasons. I think that the question is, how do we preserve that? How do we preserve what our faith teaches? And it's not just purely individualistic. I often say that, anyone who is ill probably, would want to end that suffering as quickly as possible. And I see so many people, elderly people say, Father, I said, I don't want to trouble my family, and so the whole idea seems to be, I'm a burden to someone else, but the whole idea is also from a faith perspective, what is the community's responsibility, especially towards those who are sick? Do we just end their lives? Do we just, courier them as quickly as possible back to God? In that sense, I think very important thing, life is not seen from its usefulness. Life is not seen from a transactional relationship. As long as you're useful to me, okay, I keep you on this earth. If you're not useful, I will dispatch you back to God in that sense. And I think this is where, as much as today we want to talk about the quality of human life, from a Christian perspective, I want to add this dimension of the sanctity of human life, the sacredness of human life at every stage of of a person, whether you are healthy, whether you are not healthy. Yes, we want to prepare. We know that death is a reality. Someone has already mentioned, the previous speaker. As soon as we enter this world, there's only one certainty, and that certainty is death, that we will return back to God. But in the interim, while we are here, how do we respect it? How do we give that sacredness, because that gift from God, and how do we preserve that is something that from the Christian perspective, we would like to offer this consideration for our conversation this morning. So these are just some opening remarks with regard to illnesses, dying, and death. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Father Clarence. Now we shall invite Madam Gauri to share your perspective from the Hindu religion.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Go. Can everyone hear me talking?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Kasih Hospice Foundation, for creating this forum, interfaith dialogue on a very important topic, spiritual perspective of advanced care planning. In fact, I think not many people know about ACP in Malaysia, actually. So when it comes to, when Dr. Go said that you're going to have this, I started talking to many Indians, Hindus especially. Do you know about ACP, and do you plan your dying? Do you ever think of how you want to plan, when you have reached the time? They said, no, we have not thought about it. And ACP is something alien to us. Very seldom Hindus prepare for their death. All right. So how does our religion teach people to prepare for deliberating sickness and death? Religious followers' preference for end-of-life care reflected family and geographical origins, cultural traditions, personal attitudes, and religiosity and faith interpretations. Implications of healthcare included the importance of avoiding generalizations and openness to individualized or standardized religious expressions of one's religion. Knowledge of religious beliefs and values around death and dying could be useful in preparing health professionals for ACP. So basically, it is, I myself did a lot of reading when I was asked to speak on this issue, because I had my parents who died, but we also did not make any special preparation for them. So basically, Hindus believe that the body is a temporary vessel for an immortal soul in the mortal realm. When we die, our physical body perishes, but our soul lives on. The soul continues its journey of birth, death, and rebirth in perpetuity until a final liberation. As the Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God, says of the soul, it is not born, it does not die. Having been, it will never not be, unborn, eternal, constant, and primordial. It is not killed when the body is killed. So, so Hinduism also sees death as a transition to another life by reincarnation, life in heaven with God, or absorption into Brahma, the ultimate reality. I would like to share also some basic tenets of Hinduism, which has very close connection with, the final death and dying. I think one of our speakers also, Miss Amy, also said about Dharma. We have that tenet in Hinduism as well. It is one of the 4 components of Purushashta, the aims of life, and signifies behaviors that are considered to be in according with the Rata, the order that makes life and the universe possible. It includes duties, rights, law, conduct, virtue, and right way of living. In fact, the correct name of Hinduism is Sanatana Dharma, so which says is a good way of living, is a right way of living. And another one is karma, is a concept of Hinduism which describes a system in which beneficial effects are derived from past beneficial actions and harmful effects from past harmful actions, creating a system of actions and reactions throughout the souls, the jivatmans, reincarnated lives, forming a cycle of rebirth. Hindus generally accept the doctrine of transmigration and rebirth and the complementary belief in karma. The whole process of rebirth, called samsara, is cyclic with no clear beginning or end and encompasses lives of perpetual serial attachments. And all this is towards attaining moksha, the final achievement by any Hindus, which is achieved through meditation, achieving one's dharma, detaching from the material world, and attaining a divine understanding. Moksha frees the soul from the struggles and pain, that is the samsara of the material world, and liberates the soul from the endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth. So does all Hindus in Malaysia knows about all this? No. We have this, what you call the Vedas, the scriptures, but we do not have formal religious education here for Hindus. So not many people, exactly know what is said in our scriptures. All right. In fact, in Hinduism, there are 4 parts of moksha, during your life in this earth, in this temporary earth. The Bhakti Yoga, Kriya Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Karma Yoga. It does not, Hinduism does not restricts one to perform either one or the other way to reach moksha. So, and the 4 principles of this moksha are to resolve all your life conflicts before you die. So, Bhakti Yoga, maybe you are attached to your favorite god, and you do rituals and you have prayers. And Kriya Yoga, you are very much into volunteerism. You help people, you clean the temples, or any other volunteer works that you will do. Jnana Yoga is you meditate. You can also attain moksha when you meditate. You read scriptures, you do chanting, right? So the 4 principles will resolve all your life conflicts before you die. Don't reflect bad behavior and try to filter it. Find beauty in the simple things and treat everyone the same. That is what a Hindu needs to do. So what is reincarnation? Is a belief within Hindu, it's a key belief in Hinduism. It is the process of birth and rebirth, as I said, the transmigration of souls. So the law of rebirth governs all existence in creation. The Bhagavad Gita, one of our holy scriptures, teaches the important truth that every human being has a choice to get freed from this cycle of rebirth. The general trend in many is to have certain goals in life, and much time and effort is spent in trying to achieve them. So the prerequisite for this understanding of reincarnation is that one understands the difference between the body and soul, right? That which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. This is said in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, para 17. For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and ever existing. He is not slain when the body is slain. This is also said. So thus the soul and the body are 2 different things. The body is temporary and the soul is eternal. So if every Hindu realizes this, it will be easy for them to prepare for, if they are in sickness or in death, during death. Sadhguru Bodhinanda Velan Swami reads from lesson 34 of the Himalayan academic publication, Path to Siva, explaining how Hindus prepare themselves for death. He explains that the soul never dies, as I said just now, only the physical body dies. Life and death is essential in order to achieve oneness with God. In preparation for death, we settle all mundane or worldly matters, resolve conflicts, execute duties, seek forgiveness, make amends, let go of disagreements, and then we turn inwardly, meditating and performing japa. In the final hours, we seek self-God while surrounded by family, keeping prayerful vigil, and strive to lift the crown chakra. So basically, okay, let me just read from here. Lead me from darkness to light, from death to immortality. This famed Vedic prayer proclaims the human urge to survive, to conquer death, and to know the joys of illuminated consciousness. People often pilgrimage to an isolated place in expectation of a vision sometimes, but this does not happen anymore. Yeah, but in death, most Hindus prefer to die at home, surrounded by the family, and we give, I mean, if Saiwites, we, basically feed them with milk, as the last honor by the family members before they depart. And so for us, this ACP is actually very, very important. I think it is time now that we, from the religious organization or even temples where, our people congregate, we need to educate them of the needs that they need to prepare for ACP. So because, as I said, and I would like to say it again, not many Hindus in this country, except for those, maybe if they are in the ISKCON, the Krishna consciousness, maybe they are more exposed to this. But basically, generally, even temples do not have sessions to impart the knowledge to the general Hindus about ACP. So I think maybe for the first round, I would end here, and I will continue in the second round. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gauri. And you can see the similarities between the Hinduism and Buddhism on the perspective of death and dying, and how to prepare for death and reincarnation and action reaction, and also similarities between the Christianity and Islam. So now, based on that foundational teaching on death and dying and how we prepare for that, let's talk about what are the barriers or reluctance among our members in the congregation when we want to talk to them about death and dying. We can start with Father Clarence.
I got thrown under the bus immediately. Right. Just some comments. And I think, as much as we talk about death and dying, or whether preparing for death, very often it remains at a very cerebral level. It's very intellectual. And for a lot of people who are not confronted with that reality, we don't enter into such conversations. So there seems to be the reluctance because I don't need to talk about this. It's not there. I used, my own experience. For example, when we talk about death and dying and preparing, when my dad was ill, I mean, of course, I knew that his condition was deteriorating. And as much as you prepare yourself, and as a priest, I have counseled so many people. I've talked to so many people who are having difficulties to let go of their loved ones, or having difficulty to let go of their own lives here on earth. I realized that, I was so unprepared to deal with my own dad's death, So as much as we are all speakers, religious speakers around the table here, I think the danger sometimes is that we become very intellectual and, not wanting to, or not realizing that when we have to deal with it, it's a totally different ballgame. in that sense, as much as we are prepared, educated, research for this whole question about advanced care planning. So I think one of the things is that, to be able to, from Christian perspective, to be able to offer hope. When we want to talk something about death, dying, about planning, it's about offering hope that there is a life after. For us, that's very important. And for Christians, it's based on very much on the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that Jesus came, and we are going to celebrate the birth of Jesus in just 2 weeks' time. He came into this world. He lived amongst us. God took on a human form to be with us, fully God, fully human, suffered a very cruel death, very shameful death on the cross. He died and he rose. So for Christians, that's a very important faith tenet, that Jesus, who has gone back to the Father, will also lead all those who believe in him to that eternal life. So to be able to offer that hope. And I think a lot of times the difficulty of talking about a topic like this is because the fear of the unknown. What's around the corner? You do not know what's around the corner. There isn't a reflective mirror, or maybe there is scripture that helps, but it's still words. But when having to deal with it, is that sense that there's a whole load of emotions that run through, and the emotions of those times, it's like a roller coaster ride. You meet people and you talk to them. There's some days they feel very strong, and there's some days when they feel really hopeless, desperate, and they're really down in that sense. So from a Christian perspective, is that to anchor this conversation, or maybe even to look at how do we deal with the reluctance, is that to look at it from the resurrection of Jesus, in that sense, that there is a life after that awaits us, the heaven that awaits us. And there are glimpses of that heaven that we find in the Bible, in the scripture. And that is what we should hope for. And transition is always very difficult. And I think going and talking to people, for me, that talking to people just what, have you prepared for death? Possibly the first thing is, are you mad? I mean, what are you talking about? Are you the bearer of bad news to me in that sense? But to anchor it from the lens of faith about a life after, that opens a window for a conversation. I was always amazed, and I wanted to say earlier, when I was studying in the UK, the number of advertisements you see on TV about, preparing for your death. Don't leave your family with a burden, with a big bill. Sign up for this insurance, etc., etc. It's all about, it's all about just the human relationships that we're talking about. Don't leave, a debt, or don't put your family into a difficult situation. But I think the conversation from a Christian perspective must be anchored on the life after, which is the resurrected life, which is the promise for Jesus. And I just want to end with a quote from the Bible, in the Gospel of John. Jesus says, "I'm the resurrection and the life. All those who believe in me will return to me." And that's the hope that we should aspire for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Emmy, you are from a different background in the West. How do you see people in the West view or reluctance to talk about death and dying? Unmute, please.
There is reluctance. There's more opportunity, though, now to speak about it. I'm finding in the United States and some other places. So I would say, it is interesting to first discuss about making meaning in life, like how they find meaning in life. And a lot of people are disconnected from what that means. And what I'm talking about is deep contentment, inner contentment. So not superficial happiness, but when do you know you are lit up from inside, where you feel you are in sync with either your vocation, your family, where you've chosen to live, your lifestyle. And when people are leading that kind of meaning, which in my path and in general, I find is again about that concept of trying to help as many beings as I can within reason. And I find when I'm more directed outside of myself, not just focused on me, it lends a lot of meaning to my life. We have a concept in Buddhism called bodhicitta. Bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is a Sanskrit term. Bodhi means enlightenment. Citta, mind. The mind of enlightenment is, can I reach this fully manifest state as a Buddha, where I merge with loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, all the good qualities, have purified every negative tendency, both gross and subtle, and from there I'm unlimited in how I can serve and benefit all living beings. The heart of that gives you so much meaning. So if I start to approach people that way, the people that don't want to speak about it, it's just how is life going in general, you can find an avenue in where then you discuss some, and then fear will arise from, I'm afraid I'm going to die. My mother had a terrible death. And then you find there's some space to discuss with them and the fears and things like that, and just speak honestly with people. Yep.
Yeah, Sakina, maybe you can talk from your background as chaplain working in healthcare organization. How you sense the reluctance among even your colleagues in talking about advanced care planning? Sakina.
The connection is not stable. I'm not sure if it's me or somebody else. So I feel like some of the main barriers are, we talked a little, some of you mentioned also some cultural taboos. One is also lack of medical literacy, and I think that causes some fear or uncertainty with certain people in trying to have conversations around this topic. It sounds very confusing, especially if the physician maybe is using a lot of medical jargon when it comes to the document itself. And sometimes there's discomfort on speaking with death, and that comes from some of the physicians themselves who may be circling around the topic, or they are unsure on how to bring up the seriousness of the prognosis, or sometimes they're communicating in complicated medical jargon and the family or the patient doesn't quite get the seriousness of the matter. I've had patients who are like, after the doctor talks, they're like, wait, what are you saying? Like, what are you saying? Are you saying I'm dying? Are you saying I have, so I think it's important to help like with the clarity of information sharing, and even have multiple people in a room, sometimes involved in teams where it's like physician and then the chaplains also there, or social workers there. So it's not just one person sharing all this information, and then making views of family members may not be how serious condition is. Another aspect I think is fear. I think Venerable Amy mentioned, I've got fear on upsetting each other, families and your own loved ones. Sometimes parents don't really want their children to know how serious their condition is. If it's, like a younger teen child or even a younger child, so they know they're sick, they're going in and out of hospital, but they don't exactly know how serious their illness is. Whether, or the other way around, adult children, their elder can't handle it, or they'll get upset, but I'll come a bit and share a bit about maybe some. So the fear of offending and upsetting a loved one. And the other aspect of the fear, since this is a religious and spiritual panel also, is fear of doing the wrong thing religiously. So Islamically, I'm maybe asking myself, is having conversations around this tempting death, or is it showing displeasure with God or with Allah's qadr, with Allah's divine will, with Allah's predestination, by talking about it or planning the, what within what basis that I can. this filling out this ACP mean that I'm trying to resist death, or I'm trying to quicken death if I don't want this treatment or that treatment? I really appreciate the example Dr. Munira gave earlier with the case of Mr. LK. So Mr. LK, ultimately, he died. In Islam, we believe your time of death is set. So it's what we're trying to plan and make comfortable and make easy and make open and transparent and most benefit of is the time to that time is the living time. It's not so much about the death, but now you are alive. Like, what do you want to do with this time? So Mr. Alki still died in that same amount of time, but the environment and how he died was very different depending on the context of how it was approached. So how do we overcome some of these barriers? Education and communication. That's like the two main things. Education, communication. I'd like to often focus on the big why. So when I talk about this with my patients or members of the mosque or congregation, Muslim or non-Muslim, similarly, I focus on the benefit or the impact of why these conversations benefit you, benefit your loved ones. How is this important? Why should they bother? What, it's about the honest, deep, tough conversations in general. So the big whys, I kind of break it down into three. One is from a perspective of the relationship of the person and Allah and God. So I may reflect with them, like, and ask questions like, do you believe in Allah's will, Allah's qadar, in every aspect of life, or just in matters of illness and death? Like, let's reflect on that. Sometimes we focus so much on, oh, this is so bad. The reality is God's will is all aspects of my life. Why are you just like obsessed about it when it comes to healing illness and death? And so if I do believe in that, then do I give it the due diligence and time and planning like I give anything else that I know is under God's will anyway? Dr. Mira mentioned similarly the finances, education, investment, where to live, what car to buy, what degree to study, all these things that we spend a lot of time planning, researching, budgeting, putting in resources. So from a spiritual, religious perspective, I often invite people to make an intention that this planning process, this conversation around the ACP is a form of ibadah. It is a form of worship to Allah, this process itself. So, and by doing that, Muslims are fulfilling the sunnah, the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that we invest our resources, our time, our effort, our money, our emotional energy into these tough conversations, into studying what this means, into planning my end of life, my family's end of life, as much as we can. And that, again, as the process of worship itself. I think a lot of religious and spiritual, and just barriers and the three perspectives. One is with our relationship with God. The other one is with myself, that I want my preferences to be shared. And so I talked about people, do you not want like your loved ones to know what are your preferences? Do you want to be going in and out of the ICU multiple times? Or do you want to spend that time doing something else towards the end of your life? Like we talked about in the case of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, seeking forgiveness, sharing appreciation, spending time in taking a trip, going for Umrah, going for other family trips. As an educator, I might want the end of my life to focus on leaving a legacy and charity of teaching or making videos or anything that's beneficial. One of my friends who's a chaplain, he actually died recently. He was only in his early 30s and he had children. And he actually used his life as a case study. He used the last 6 months of his life sharing the importance of preparing for end life and blogging and making videos, giving and khutbahs until the week of his death. And that was the legacy that he wanted to share and use, knowing and being able to plan ahead. And with family members, then the fear of upsetting or the fear of upsetting each other, is that a kind of balance that with the desire to make everybody's experience more compassionate. People who go through ACPs, just the conversation itself, whether they do the document or not, the death cycle tends to be less conflicted. It reduces the decision-making burden that the family members have, especially when they don't know your preferences. research, this is all backed by research. Like research shows that family members feel less stress, less guilt, less blaming each other, less arguments, and they can focus their energy instead on being with the dying loved ones and on their own well-being, instead of like arguing and stressing about it throughout the dying process, and then after death, the funeral arrangements or something like that as well. So yeah, just
Thank you,
combining
Sakina.
those.
Wonderful. Yeah, you are given a broad perspective of the challenges faced and also ways to overcome all those challenges. Maybe go to Gauri. You mentioned that many Hindus may not be exposed to this topic of preparing for death and dying, and you have also said that education and communication are ways to go forward. Being a chairwoman of your Malaysia Hindu Sangam for Women, where women are better educated, their mother, sister, teachers. So what are the maybe some plans you have to promote this among Hindus?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Go. In fact, this is an enlightenment for me as well, because it never crossed my mind that, ACP is such an important thing, and it can be interwoven with the religious belief, and, how things can be much easier for them, in the journey for them to, towards what do you call, death and dying, right? So I think encouraging those with severe illness to participate in ACP discussions is very, very important. It can empower them to communicate their preferences for care at the end of life or during periods of severe illness before they become too incapacitated to express such preferences. Very few Hindu families give their, those parents who are in deathbed, the opportunity to, to express their preference. I don't think so. I think exactly like what Father Clarence said, I myself did not do this. I did not ask my parents, in what kind of situation they will be comfortable in, in facing their last moments. And as everyone has said, it's not a taboo. I'm not going to say it's a taboo, but nobody speaks about death. Everybody says it's life. In this material world, I have I have my dharma, I have my duty, I have my family, I have to earn for my family, I will do my best. I have to give the best education, I have to have a bungalow house. The material things are the ones that, actually something that they think every day. And for those who are, the needy, the next, what they're going to have for their next meal. So how do we, I mean, I did engage in conversation before this session, as I said just now, with many few Hindus about, have you ever thought about your death? Have you ever thought about, the moment that you are going to die? What you have to prepare? No, none. Have you read the scriptures? What does our religion say about that you will be born again? That, we have to fulfill our dharma again in a better condition, a better situation. None of them have given me a positive reply in this. So in that case, actually, I think I totally agree with Chaplain Sakina that more awareness have to be given in Malaysia, not only for Hindus, but across all the religious, all the religions, about ACP. And in a way, it will give them the choice and open up their mind. Oh yes, this is something that I have to think about as well. It is not only what I'm doing in the material world. What about what did my religion say about the afterbirth? Nobody thinks about it, right? So it is very, very important. And when you say about barrier, reluctance or barrier, there are many few phenomenons. as I said, as many of them have shared, the communication part, the timing, space, the social organizations, their role, even environmental, the environment around you and biological variation, all this needs to be taken into account. And I did see in the chat group, somebody have asked, what is the current ACP application in Malaysia?
Yeah.
So if we can come up, since we have a new government now, a unity government now, we have a new what do you call health minister, and people have, we are now going to think about people. We want people in Malaysia to have a good life, not only now but also the next life. All right, according to each of our belief. So I think this can be interwoven, and it can be carried, proposed to the Ministry of Health, that some kind of awareness campaign, or more programs and activities of ACP can be translated and exposed to our people. That will definitely help. Yeah.
Thanks, Kali. It's everybody's efforts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Emmy, you something to add?
Yes, I was going to add that that's actually really, really helpful, especially from the government side. So that can be exciting. Another thing I wanted to add for everyone in general, and as well as the two questions that have come up in the chat. Overall, what I found with most people, whether they have a belief system or not, that does pervade several religions, is if you have some, the personal context you have with your congregations, with your memberships, is sometimes you can find a way in when they come to you, they're afraid, what should I do? Or my daughter got cancer, my mother's old, sometimes I find that you can remind them, ask them to think about when that person did die in their family. And let's say it is an old grandmother, an aunt, a parent, and the parents that did designate the wishes they wanted, and how easy it was for them to then follow those wishes. And for the people that did not designate anything, how difficult it was for the caregivers to guess what the person wanted. This is an avenue I found to have people start discussing it. And often when they reflect on that, they think, oh, I think I do want to get my directives in place. I think I do want to discuss that with the family, that, so if you're just reminding them about those things, about how much easier it will be, not only for their loved ones, but then for their minds to know that you're writing down, you can write down a specific, you'd like your instructions. And when you do that, there's a great relief for your mind. Most people say there's a great relief like that.
Sure, thanks, Sammy. So the question I had from the audience, basically, particularly in Malaysia, when in the same family, there may be people have different beliefs, even free-thinker. How do you approach and talk about that and dying to one of the families who may be facing a serious illness? Maybe we start with Father Clarence. Then we will with Sakina, the second.
Yeah. I think it's a lot easier if someone has a faith basis to talk a little bit more, in that sense that there is an element of what you believe in. And I think in a multicultural and multi-religious society that we live in, is to be also be able to respect each other's beliefs and convictions, and to support that. And I think it's not just one particular way. I mean, like here we are talking, in a very multi-religious perspective. We recognize that there are some commonalities that we share. And then there are some things that are very unique to each particular tradition or religion, and to be able to respect that. With people who don't have a particular belief, and I think it might be a little bit more challenging to see, especially if they are afraid of what is next, what awaits them. Of course, some people have already a certain mindset, what happens that, that everything comes to an end. And I think what is important is sometimes I think, I do not have all the answers. Sometimes to acknowledge that I don't have all the answers, but to be able to be present to a particular person who is struggling with the reality of dying, the reality of death, to be able, and sometimes it's just a comforting presence. With regard to opening conversations, I think opening conversations about, whether it's ACP or whether it's AMD, and I think there's a lack of literacy among people today, especially in Malaysia. Probably in the West, there's a lot more things happening. People are unsure whether they can do this or they can't do that. And I think from my own experience, especially from Christians, is that, whether it's like, if I decide not to have a certain treatment, is that the same as euthanasia? So sometimes it's the lack of understanding. And I think that the discernment or the understanding is to be able to know when do we keep trying, and when it's time to let go. And I think that's the challenge. That's both for the one who is struggling with it and also for the families. And I think this is so that I think the cultural uniqueness of our society sometimes makes it difficult to have these conversations. Leave aside religion. I mean, even culturally, I know, for example, let me give an example, concrete example. In some cultures, let's say when a spouse dies, and it's quite all right to buy the next burial ground to your spouse. It's quite, people do it. In some cultures, it's totally a taboo, to pre-book your burial plot. So there are these cultural differences that makes it difficult to have such conversations about preparing for death. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to recognize those difficulties and also to respect them. And some people do not want to talk about it, and not to force it. So I think, especially in mixed families, I think for me, the first thing is to recognize the sensitivities of these topics, to have a pulse of it. It's, as I said, we may be quite enthusiastic. Gauri has now just extended the MOH wish list now, which is, growing by the day with the new government. I pity the government. I mean, now they have a Christmas wish list as long as probably 5 kilometers already from the citizens. But I think also recognizing the cultural sensitivities of people where they are, and to work from there, and not, because I have a textbook answer for all these things, but sometimes it doesn't work with people in certain situations. So I think for me, I think just want to end with saying that, get a pulse of the situation, the sensitivities, try and understand the cultural uniqueness that each one brings, and then we take it from there. And and sometimes people just do not want to talk about it, and we have to respect that also.
Yeah, thank you, Father Clarence. Sakina, I think the conversation about advanced care planning is not solely Ministry of Health. It's actually, in my opinion, it's not about health. And what is your opinion from your, when you were in Malaysia, you've been promoting and working in various organizations talking about importance of quality of life and quality of death. What is your take on this? How should we go forward, knowing now we are so lacking in engaging public talk about ACP?
Yeah. That's like the $1 million question. I think I go back to my two: education and compassion, education and communication, like the two taglines that I keep repeating. And just maybe some practical examples what we've done here and also wherever I think it applies. Trying to partner with physicians, so like religious leaders, physicians together, doing panels like this in mosques. We've done that here in mosques in Pusat community back home. We always do parenting courses or financing courses on finance, or courses on different kinds of trainings, building a happy family and things like that. Why not have more of these kind of practical conversations around the ACP and just prepare life and death and living well before we die? So I would recommend just even if you partner one physician, one of the religious leaders in your community, and just do a communication series. And people can contribute in different ways. So some can contribute funds. You have money, you can help sponsor events like this. Some can contribute time. Some can contribute the promotion. Some can contribute by opening the doors in different community centers, different mosques, different religious homes, to have these conversations. I went with one of my faculty members, a Christian pastor, to her church, and after Sunday sermon, they had a session with in the conference room behind the church, which was like 3 hours on advanced care planning, 2 to 3 hours. So they went through the document, they answered questions. So very, very practical session. And it's not so much about religion at all at that time. It's really about opening the conversations. Yeah.
Thank you, Sakina. As you know, hospices in Malaysia, mainly community organization, we do home care, and we have been talking to our end-of-life patients on advanced care planning. So I'd like to invite Dr. Munira Ibrahim on her experience when she opened the discussion about advanced care planning and how do patient and the family takes it.
Thank you, Dr. Go. It's a really interesting conversation with everybody here. It's very variable. I think whatever everybody has mentioned today, it's the same across whether we're talking about the palliative care population or whether the general population. Perhaps, sometimes it can be perhaps too extreme. Some are really ready to talk about it because they've already thought about it at the point of they're given this very grave diagnosis, knowing that they have a limited lifespan left. They've already made all the arrangements, they're far in advance and ready to have the conversations. But also we get the opposite, where people are still in denial, still angry, still just not ready. And I think it's a matter of exploring that, understanding that it's an extremely sensitive conversation, to respect that, to hold the space open for conversation, and just work with that person in the capacity that they are comfortable, and allowing them to know that we are there to support them through this conversation. And most of the time, what happens is obviously sensitively maneuvering through this very delicate terrain, is that we do get there in the end, and that is our aim. I always say that the medical side of it is actually the less challenging. It's challenging, but this is the more challenging side: the communications, the delving into trying to understand in terms of the perhaps spiritual distress, or and everybody's different, individualized goals and their past experiences and what they wish for at this end of life. So it's extremely challenging, but also extremely rewarding when we can actually engage with our patients and their families at this level. And our aim is to try and do that before obviously that time comes, so that they can make the necessary preparations and we can assist them in whatever way. And sometimes it's just a matter of being there to have that conversation, because sometimes many people aren't comfortable to have it with their own families, because obviously they don't want to distress them with this conversation, and perhaps even the families are not ready for this, but they need to have it. So I love what I do, and I think it's an extremely it's an honor to be able to assist our patients in this particular aspect. So thanks, Dr. Go.
Yeah, thank you very much. So for the last 100 minutes, we have been given such a rich and diverse and some similarity ideas and knowledge about how each of you, representative of your own religion, talk about death and dying, and how you prepare your congregates about the importance of advanced care planning, and a lot of things to be done in Malaysia. I can hear your concern that many Malaysians do not know about advanced care planning, and Kasih Hospice Foundation is here to work with you if there's any need. Just like Sakina said, we can go to your place of meeting to talk to people and to share some of the templates we actually modify, adapt to our own culture, to a document that people can write. But more importantly, it's not about document. It's more about communication, conversation, and it's ongoing, it's changing, and it's dynamic. So we certainly welcome, and that's why today's Interfaith Dialogue, we emphasize on that, because we see the lacking. And we are working with other organizations, including Malaysia Hospice Council, to bring this forward. Certainly with all the ministry as well. And you, Father Clarence and Madam Gauri, you are as an ESCO member, a very important organization, can bring this up, and we are here, and many other hospices in various states are willing to take this on. So now we come to the end of this year's Interfaith Dialogue. I would like to invite each of you to give a take-home message to our participant, and what do you think about advanced care planning? So we start with Father Clarence.
Yeah, thank you very much. So thanks to Kasih Hospice Foundation for having organized this conversation, a very interesting conversation. I just like to maybe in 1 minute just to conclude, and I think one of the things that before we talk about advanced care planning, I think one of the things that at least I have learned and many people have learned, having gone through this 2 years of a pandemic, that life is so fragile. You know, you can be strong, you can be, very healthy, and you realize that how fragile life is in a situation like this. In that context, I don't want to end on a very negative note, but I just maybe on a positive note, not so much encouraging people to go and do it, but I think from a religious perspective and from my perspective also, and I think is to be able to live the life to the fullest, take every day, every moment as a gift of God, and to value that, to live a good life. In the Bible it says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. So don't carry unforgiveness in your heart. Don't carry any anger in your heart. Live every day to the fullest, because very often we forget to count our blessings. And I think that's the important thing that we need to, that I would like to say, to remember, every day, whatever challenges that we face, whether it's health or other challenges, let's not forget equally or even more, there are many other blessings that come our way, and let's not forget to count our blessings. And one of the most common night prayers that we have in our Catholic tradition is a prayer from the Bible. It says, at the end of the day, you say this: at last, all-powerful Master, let your servant go in peace, for you have made that promise to us, and the promise is that eternal life. And so live a good life, live a faithful life, and live a life to the fullest, and enjoy the blessings that God has given to each one of us, and that is meant for each one of us. And whatever time that God has given, whether it's short or long, that's the fullness of life that God has given to us to enjoy with Him here on earth, and with one another, and with creation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Clarence. Madam Gauri?
Okay. Firstly, I would say I would definitely be an advocate of ACP, and I would like to, be more close to Hospice Foundation. I have not, I have an opportunity to learn what you all do. Through this wonderful session, I think I really admire all of you. As what Dr. Munira said, so many things that you all are doing is actually, wonderful. And I would definitely advocate about this to our people as well. And definitely, I totally agree with Father Clarence that we as human beings born into this not permanent world, material, not permanent. We just have to see God in others. Hindus believe that, the Paramatman is within us. So if God is within you, you see the same thing onto others, right? And how do you treat them? So when it comes to Malaysia, I think the respect that we have to other religion, to other races, their belief, their culture, it is very important. And this ACP combines all that, and that question which very clearly Father Clarence answered, that if you have different believers in one family, how do you go about it? It is basically a balance to to understand and respect. So I would like to end by saying that in Hinduism, at the moment of dying, there's no particular belief. The belief in total is that one should have lived a good life. That's all. So what do we need to live a good life? Do that. And everything will fall into place. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the advice. Thank you, Madam Dory. Venu Emmy, bila? Unmute, please.
I echo what many others have said, and I'd really like to thank Kasih Hospice Foundation so much, and all of you. What I would mention is, can we also work with everyday small problems to be able to cope and transform those so that we're able to deal with our bigger problems, such as death when it comes, death of a loved one or death of ourselves? And can we work on healing relationships that we have right now and creating more positive ones as we go along without forgetting our interconnection with everyone? Cultivating a spiritual practice can be very, very helpful. An authentic spiritual practice can be wonderful, and working within that community. And then another thing I do in some of the courses is we talk about something called a bucket list, which most people think of a bucket list as everything I want to do before I die. However, what's an interesting bucket list is what qualities would you like to develop in yourself before you die? So if we can focus on that, it will lend tremendous meaning to our lives and lead to a peaceful, peaceful death. So I wish everyone all the best, to please take care. And to quote from Lama Yeshe, please be gentle with yourself. You will then be gentle with all others. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Emmy. Chaplain Sakina.
Thank you, Dr. Go. I will just wrap up with inviting the emphasis of education and communication, and with two main approaches. One is that we emphasize curiosity and compassion over correctness. Sometimes some of the fears that we have with approaching challenging discussions is, am I going to get it right? Or if it's from a religious perspective, oh, I don't know their religion and I'm going to get it wrong. And so to be curious, to open the conversation, and just with each other, those of you who are clinicians, with your patients, those of you with your own family members, your loved ones, curiosity and compassion over being correct, or sometimes I say relationship over being right. So it's about that relationship, the conversation about trying to get things right. And I want to end with the dua, the prayer that is commonly recited by many Muslims. And maybe today it might take on a deeper meaning after our discussion. It's just very short. It is Allahumma ja'alna husnul khatimah, which is, may we be granted a husnul khatimah, a beautiful ending, a good, peaceful ending. And I will add, may we be granted a beautiful life as well. Amen.
Thank you very much, Sakina. That's beautiful. Yeah. Last but not least, Dr. Munira, what's your take-home message for us all?
Thank you, everyone. I just love the words everybody's spreading and the positivity. Basically, I just want to say that, ACP, reiterate that ACP is for everyone, and spirituality is for everyone, regardless of our faiths and understandings. And that our aim at Kasih especially is to help our patients specifically to have a good life and a good death. But then this is applicable outside of Kasih to everyone, every living person. And so that's what we wish for everyone. And let's continue to have this conversation, spread it around. And so, spread the awareness of ACP and a beautiful ending to everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, I would like to thank from the bottom of my heart all of you panelists who have given us the 2 hours on the Saturday morning, such a wonderful discussion, communication, conversation about this topic, which is so essential for live a meaningful life. With that, thank you very much and have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Go.
Thank you.
It's a great session.
Thank you.